Hi guys, I am Ghulam Sadiq. My channel is emcforyou. Please subscribe my channel and buy this phone. Link is available in description.
About this phone. Right off the bat, I will say this. If you're looking for just a Samsung phone in general in 2020, and likely into next year as well, this is easily the best choice. And it may also be the best overall Android device out right now, at least for folks specifically here in the US. I have a lot more to say about this phone, so let's just go ahead and get into it. But if you're looking for a straightforward answer to whether or not you should consider this phone, yes, absolutely. This is the phone to get. Physically, the S20 FE is this sort of interesting combination of fun colors paired with cheaper materials, but at the same time, it's a similar form factor to the big flagship phones with all the extra features thrown in. This sort of mint green finish, I think, is really nice. It's certainly my favorite color in the lineup, but you have half a dozen to choose from: blue, orange, red, white, and purple. The material here, at least on the back, is plastic. It's got a matte finish, sort of a smooth feel, but you know what material this is as soon as you hold it in your hand. And the metal frame with the polished chrome finish sort of balances out the whole look, I think. So in the end, it's still a good looking phone, even if you do miss out on the complete premium build. But the thing is, if you can look past the plastic back cover, which I don't really think is a huge deal anyway, you'll find that all the other important stuff is still included. There's wireless charging, reverse charging via power share, it's IP68 water and dust resistant, so unlike the A series, for example, this S20 FE retains those, I guess, flagship features, even with a less premium build. At 6.5 inches, the S20 FE is also really big. It's one of the larger phones Samsung offers, and it's just a bit smaller than the flagship S20 Plus. You've got a lot of screen to work with. It's a bit to manage with one-handed use, I'm sure, for some people, and I realize now that we're seeing more of a push towards smaller devices, but I still know a lot of folks who want as big of a screen as possible, and that's pretty much what you do get here. And taking a look around at everything else, you'll find an SD card slot for expandable storage, which is good, no headphone jack, which is probably expected at this point, even though you do get that on the A series phones, and underneath the front display is a fingerprint sensor. With this, its speed and accuracy actually mimics the flagship S20, and in my experience, it's significantly better than what ships on the A series phones. So just another area where Samsung took the extra step rather than compromising. And there's also Face Unlock 2, which you should pair up with, and that works fine as well. Another thing you won't get on a cheaper Samsung phone is a dual stereo speaker setup. You've got the one downward speaker towards the bottom and the additional speaker in the earpiece, and this out loud listening experience here is really good. Yes, I do think other phones may still do it better, but it's worth highlighting, and it's actually one of the biggest things I miss on the A series phones. And here's a quick sample so you can get an idea.
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading.
Now, I already mentioned that the screen is big, but there's more to it than that. The 6.5 inch display comes in at a resolution of 2400 by 1080, it packs in around 407 pixels per inch, and it's Samsung's Super AMOLED panel. That selection of specs isn't unheard of. In general, the display looks great, as all Samsung displays do, but the extra addition you get here with the S20 FE is a 120Hz high refresh rate option. This is a feature that came with the flagship S20s earlier in the year. But here's the thing, if you give this phone to just about anyone and ask them how it feels, they're likely going to say, wow, this phone feels fast, it feels snappy, it's super smooth, it's more responsive with every touch, tap, and scroll. And that's kind of the point with 120Hz. This is a phone that just feels way faster than any other phone in its price range, and the 120Hz display is basically what does that. Are the rest of the specs with the screen groundbreaking? No, definitely not. You do miss out on QHD resolution compared to the flagship phones, but the 120Hz mode is probably the defining feature with the screen in general and probably with this phone specifically. The other defining feature of the S20 FE is sort of a collection of things, but it's the internal specs packed inside. Samsung very well could have just shoved a mid-range processor into this thing like the Snapdragon 730G and called it done, but they didn't. They shipped this phone with a Snapdragon 865 chipset, an Adreno 650 GPU, the choice of either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM, and by the way, mine has the full 8 gigs here, and either 128 or 256 gigs of UFS 3.1 storage with, like I said, the option to throw in an SD card. So there's absolutely nothing inside this phone that indicates it isn't Samsung's 2020 flagship device. And if I hadn't yet bought a new Samsung phone at this point, this would seriously be the only option I would even consider based on the specs alone. The value here is just unmatched when you consider what's inside, and I'm very surprised that Samsung took this route with the S20 FE. This phone is fully capable and plenty powerful for anything and everything you'd want it to do. Samsung's continued One UI updates have been a breath of fresh air this year. So many great improvements to the software experience that I actually like what Samsung does now. And looking ahead, I can safely say that this S20 FE is a phone I'd be comfortable with 3 or 4 years down the line at least. I'm not sure how I can state this any other way, but this S20 FE simply has no compromises, and it kind of doesn't make sense. It's almost too good, and I don't want to come across like I'm overhyping this phone. I'm just looking at it objectively, spec-wise, performance-wise, feature-wise. This S20 FE just isn't lacking anything. And this also extends to the battery as well. With a 4500 milliamp battery packed inside, it's bigger than the regular flagship S20. It's the same size as the S20 Plus, but I found this phone to last just as long, if not longer, than those phones. It's an all-day device and then some. And since you've got a Snapdragon chipset rather than an Exynos one inside, I found it to be better optimized. Disabling the 120Hz refresh mode does help battery quite a bit by adding additional hours of use at least. But even if you don't want to do that, you're going to be getting through a full day no problem. Just like with basically everything else, Samsung also essentially took their flagship S20 cameras and included them here with the S20 FE. But there's actually even more to it than that. On one hand, you've got basically the same 12 megapixel main lens and the same 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. What's missing is that 64 megapixel telephoto lens. That gets bumped down on the S20 FE to an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and you lose the 64 megapixel high detail shooting mode, obviously. On the other hand though, the selfie camera is a 32 megapixel f2.2 shooter, and in my experience, the selfies are oftentimes better than what came off the flagship S20. Feature and shooting mode wise, there's nothing missing here. Everything from 4K 60 to pro video mode to all the filters and functions and everything else. And the results, I think, speak for themselves. This is, for all intents and purposes, the flagship camera setup from the flagship S20. And while in years past, Samsung's lesser line of phones like the A series or like the S10e maybe could have had less lenses, less features, missing additions, or whatever else, this S20 FE misses nearly nothing. You even get the crazy 30 times zoom on here too. You pretty much get it all, and once again, I'm just really surprised with everything Samsung decided to include. Samsung brought to market easily the best overall value Android device in the US that's available right now, and probably the best value for the foreseeable future too.